All right. First of all, is anybody not cool with me not wearing a mask during the semester? And I'm totally fine wearing a mask if even one of you is not cool with that. Who has a problem with me taking off my mask during class? You can also see me privately if you don't want to raise your hand. Okay, so I'm gonna, this is 6 feet, right? I think we're good. So first thing I'm gonna ask you guys is to come forward and fill the first 3 rows so that we have a nice intimate setting. In fact, I'm gonna sit since we're not that big. So let's fill the first 3 rows of the classroom. Thank you. You can charge it. You can also, over there, there's a charger. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, guys. All right, what we're going to do today, I'm going to first introduce, well, I'm going to look at your names first of all. Then we're going to go over the syllabus, and then I will give a general introduction of the class, and then I will set you free. So let's start with your names. The way I'm going to learn your names is I'm going to learn your last name. And the way I'm going to remember your last name is you're going to tell me the origin, the country of origin of your last name. That way I associate you with something, and then I can remember you better. So as I go down your names, tell me 2 things, the country of your last name. And if you don't know, just pick something. You can invent. I'm fine with that. So pick a country if you don't know, or if you want to change, you can. So this is the moment, right? You guys are the generation of fluid identities, right? So you can do that. And then the second thing I want to know is if you're a philosophy major, and if not, what is your major? Okay. So Avila is Avila.
Ecuador, and I'm undecided.
Okay. Have you done philosophy before?
I took a philosophy class last semester.
Okay, good. Bonnet.
That's French. I'm not a philosophy major.
Political science. Okay, great. Whoa, I don't know how to say this. Choedon. Anybody? Okay. Critchell.
So Critchell is British, I think, and I'm a philosophy minor.
Okay, great. Goldstein.
I think it's either Polish or German, and I'm a philosophy major.
Okay. Mackenzie. Mm-hmm.
It's Jamaican.
Okay, good. So awesome. Nasiri.
It's from Afghanistan.
Okay, great. Raman. Okay, Ramos.
Spanish and philosophy minor.
Okay. Who else was it? Critchell, you're philosophy minor, right?
Yep.
Okay. Making sure. Safin. Where did Safin go? There you are.
Is the name originated from the Middle East.
Okay.
My economics.
Okay, no philosophy, but you did a lot of classes. Yes. Good. Weiselberg.
Philosophy is probably somewhere from Germany, Eastern European. I'm a philosophy minor.
Okay. Williams.
Williams, I think it's true. Philosophy major.
Okay. And then, like usual, I don't know, this guy, if you know him, he's always signing up for my classes, never shows up. Bowen Wu. I'm sure you know him. He's, I know you. Well, it's about time. You will have to explain to me what you're doing because I have seen your name for past 4 semesters now and never I see you. Okay, Bowen Wu. Last name?
Oh, it's parents are from Bombay, China, and also philosophy.
Okay, I figured, yeah. Okay, great. All right. Okay, one thing I want you to do right now, everybody take your phone out. This is the only moment. And send me an email.
You didn't phone me.
Huh?
You didn't phone me.
Oh, okay. Let me write my email and then I'll look what I missed here. This is my email. I need to be able to reach you at any moment. So send me an email from the email you always use. And then in the subject line, you put your first and last name. That way, if I need to contact you, boom, I can do that. Okay, who am I missing? Yes. Rodriguez? Oh, yeah. Here you are. Okay. Where is the name from?
Ecuador.
Ecuador and philosophy?
Minor.
Okay. Got it. Okay. No, no. Anybody else did I miss? No, I got everybody. Okay. Awesome. Good. Okay, so we got the email. Okay, so I'm going to be using Blackboard and Google Drive for your assignments. So let me tell you a little bit about that. I'll wait a little bit till you send the email. Okay, if you open your Blackboard, you will see that I've modified the menu, I've simplified it. You have on the top, you have the, I believe, the home page with all the announcements. Okay, check regularly. I might say something important. Then you have the syllabus, right? Then you have the tests, assignments and grades. So this is the link to the Google Drive. So you will be handing your assignments on the Google Drive. We will go paperless. So whatever assignments you have, and this is important, first save it as a PDF and keep it till the end of the semester, because it has happened. I have a student, she thought she was handing in assignments, and at the end of the semester, I had nothing from her. She had to redo everything. So you're saving everything, right, in a file for this class. And please modify it to a PDF before sending it to me, okay? So you will be basically dragging it from your desktop into the Google Drive, into the appropriate folder. We'll talk about that in a second. And the same for your tests, right? Now, this is a little tricky. I'm a little embarrassed about this, but everybody can see everybody else's work in the Google Drive, just so you know that I know, right? So I'm gonna ask you right now, right, Safin? I'm gonna ask you right now to please pledge to me that you will not look at anybody else's homework. You will be respectful of them, of myself, and of yourselves, and do your own work and put it in there and then leave. Can we do that? Can you pledge by raising your hand that you're not going to be looking at anybody else's work? Usually it has worked. I haven't had too many problems, but if I do catch someone has copied, there are terrible consequences, especially if it's a test. You're basically losing those points. There is no makeup for that. So it's about, I think, 12 points you would be losing just like that. So if you're gonna do it well, right? So yeah, so be aware of that, because yeah, whatever work I see that looks like someone else's work, the points will just be lost, right? Okay, good. And then the last tab on Blackboard is the recorded lecture, some recording, right, on here on the computer. So if you have to miss class because of COVID-related issues or quarantine or whatever, you can still continue to take the class by going on YouTube, and I will link it up to our playlist, our class playlist. Okay, any questions on this Blackboard section, introduction? Okay. I think that's it. Okay, the books. I would like you to buy the actual paper books, right? I don't want any ebooks or anything like that in the class. There are two main reasons for that. Number one, a book is the embodiment of a soul, right? You can't, the soul leaves when it's on the Kindle or when it's on a whatever, one of those devices, right? You want to have the actual book, first of all, because you will be reading, underlining, scribbling, annotating. This is how we read philosophy, right? You can't read philosophy without engaging with the text in that way. So it's very important that you have the actual paper book. And also, some of these books you'll want to keep, right? Books become companions, right? This is, I always see my classes as a kind of a voyage, right? A journey where we travel together for a bit, and you want to have the books with you so that what we've talked about stays with you for the rest of your life, right? So some of these books you will fall in love with, you'll want to keep, you'll regret having bought the Kindle version, right? So any problems with buying the books? We're starting with Emmanuel Kant. Next week, you will have to have already the book, the groundwork, right? The way to buy the book is to go to the QC online bookstore, and you order the books there. I've put all of them except for the African one, which is out of print, which I have to scan for you. Okay, any questions on, any problems about getting the actual books? Anybody have issues with that? Has already bought all the books online, for example. We good? Okay. All right. I think I said everything in terms of the logistics. All right, let me go over the syllabus with you briefly so you have an idea of the work, and then I will introduce the class. Okay, so I actually wrote this course in 2016, right after the elections, not necessarily linked so much with our ex-president, but especially linked with the rise of xenophobia and that I was seeing in this country. Not only xenophobia, but also the whole movements we had within our country with regards to racism and so forth, and then the Me Too movement. There is something is happening where we are seeing a collision, right, between us and them, right? Whether it's immigrants, whether it's people of a different race or of a different gender, we are on a collision course in this country with regards to the other, right? We are more and more growing incapable of connecting to another, right? There is so much more anti-Semitism, racism, xenophobia in this country than there ever has been, perhaps, right? That I thought I need to write a course about the importance of the stranger, on how we as human subjects cannot actually grow, develop, mature without any contact with strangers in our lives. If you grow up your whole life with the same people, you're gonna stay small. That's the idea, right? The ability to open up onto the stranger, whether it's somebody who is from a different country, an immigrant, or somebody from a different gender or different sexual orientation or different race, the ability to do that is the measure of your ability to grow, to develop, and to blossom as a human being, right? So this is really the purpose of the class, is to show that the encounter with the stranger, instead of being a crisis or a problem or something that strips us away our identity, is actually, I'm going to show that there is immense benefit of the effort of connecting with the stranger, right? We're going to talk about, in terms of the human subject, what happens to the human subject when it is in contact with a stranger, and why it is something we should aspire to, why this contact is something we should aspire to as human beings, right? So that's the goal of the class. I wrote it as a response to the political climate, because I felt we need to recover the interest in the stranger. We are closing in, if you even see in just the way cities are laid out, we are closing in onto our own, right? We still have segregation, right? It's incredible, right? That we still, even in Queens College, we stick to our own, right? If you look, everybody, it's a very mixed campus, but who are you friends with, right? Look at your friends list, right? So we still very much sticking to our own, finding it difficult to connect, to cross those bridges. And what we're gonna learn in this class is that you cannot become the full level of yourself unless you're able to begin to forge these bridges, these relationships, right? So we're going to talk about that. So you can take it on the political level. There's a few political science majors. You can take it on the political level, why a given society needs to connect to the stranger in order to grow, blossom, mature. Or you can take it on the individual level, why me, I need to learn to connect to the stranger in order to blossom, grow, and mature. This is, by the way, great marital counseling that I'm doing already, right? Once you end up with a lifelong partner, you will go back to these notes because you will see after the honeymoon is over that you have married a stranger, right? So your ability now to negotiate with the stranger that's in your house, right, is still, right? Everything in life you can't miss it. It's gonna happen. You have to learn to navigate and encounter. Right, so that's what we're going to be doing. So we're going to study 5 texts. We're going to start with Kant, just because Kant is kind of on the bridge. On the one hand, he's still very Western, still very centered on the subject as individual, autonomous, right? Kant emphasizes autonomy, but at the same time, oh my God, sorry. At the same time, right, Kant is also moving in the direction of a relational subject, which is interesting. So he seems like, I know there's like this insult going around in academia about dead white men, right? So this particular dead white man, actually interesting, right? He's actually bridging towards the later works that we're gonna study, where the subject is redefined completely in order to be able to engage with a stranger. So he's the first we will study. And then we will study Martin Buber, who is early 20th century. We will do Emmanuel Levinas, and I'll talk about all these in a second. Buber and Levinas are Jewish philosophers, and then we will do two African philosophers, Leopold Senghor and Augustine Shetty. And then we will finish with a feminist philosopher, Luce Irigaray. So that's the program. And I'll tell you a little bit about each one of these philosophers in a second. So this just to give you a gist. Now let me go into the logistics. Any questions so far? No? Okay. All right, attendance. This is a difficult class. I'm going to be straight up with you, right? Those of you who took my classes before, this is next level. This is not the same thing in terms of the difficulty of the material and also the level I will expect in terms of your writing, right? I'm going to actually be looking at your writing and annotating and making and working with you on that. So this is an upper level class, you should know this. Missing a class is going to be disastrous. Thank God I'm recording, so you have that option, but you will be losing points if you miss class because of the part of the class, which is participation, so, which I'll talk about in a second. So your, the assignment you will do the most regularly is called the reading assignment. So let me draw you what I'm looking for. Reading assignment looks like this. It's 4 paragraphs, single spaced. So 4 paragraphs, single spaced. The first 2 are 2 critiques, and the second 2 are 2 questions you have about the text. So basically the reading assignment is you reading, but not only reading, you are beginning to wrestle with the text. Okay, you're not just reading and you know, absorbing what you can, you're actually interrogating the text, searching the text, disagreeing with the text, grappling with the text. And the reading assignment is to encourage you to do that. So the first 2 paragraphs is you being critical with the text. Not critical, sorry, it's not critical. It's, I'm sorry, I need to reverse that. You need to start with the questions and end with the critiques. You don't criticize before you understand. So the 2 questions is you basically grappling with the text, kind of going over what does this mean? I wonder what this concept means. What does he mean here? So you're really trying to search, trying to exegete the text. And you will inevitably in this class stumble over difficulties in the text because none of the texts are simple. None of them you can just sit here and understand. You need an initiation, which we will do in the class. But in the meantime, you should already wrestle with it. So you're reading a passage from Kant and you're like, oh, I wonder what he means by reason or by what he means by the good, what's going on. And then you try to answer the best you can, right, in that paragraph. So you do that twice. And then you can have 2 critiques where you critically engage with the text. So this is you now disagreeing or you know, feeling uncomfortable, embracing your discomfort with the text and telling me why and so forth. So this is you beginning the wrestling process, right? Philosophy is a wrestling process with the text. That's really one of the main things you do in philosophy. So this assignment, you do pretty much every time there's a reading. So in the syllabus, you will see that we have some days where there's no readings, right? For example, it just says the name of the author, Kant. That's no reading assignment, I'm just introducing. And then you have, when you have page numbers, that on that day, you have the reading assignment due for those page numbers, right? So February 7, it says groundwork 7 to 11. So you read that and then do the reading assignment and have it by, have it with you on February 7. Reading assignments are, you will put in the Google Drive, right? You will drag your PDF version into the little folder called reading assignments, right? And I don't accept late reading assignments. So if you miss that, you miss that. Okay. Second thing connected to that is the class discussion. So every day when we have a reading, we will have 20 minutes in the class where you talk among yourselves about the text based on what you have done in your reading assignment. So I need you to bring some copy of it. Maybe it's on your phone, right? That's fine. Or on your computer. Hopefully not on your computer because computers block the discussion. So try to have it discreetly on your phone or on a piece of paper or in your head, right? But have your wrestlings ready to share with your group, right? So you'll share your questions, you'll share your criticisms. And the group should respond to you. Don't just sit there, right? Respond, say, well, here's where I can help you understand that, or I disagree with you on this, and blah, blah, blah. And you're discussing now, right? And then, so this is the second layer of wrestling, right? First layer, you're wrestling alone. Second layer, you're wrestling together. Third layer will be me. I will be lecturing on the text, but by that time you will be ready, right? You will have wrestled so much, you will be exhausted, and you will be ready to receive some important information about your questions, right? So there are 3 layers so that we enter these texts gradually. Okay, so that group discussion, you get the credit only if you are on time, right? So you need to be on time. If you're late, just sit down, join your group, but know that you have lost a point, right? It's pointless to give me any excuse, right? I will smile at you and say, no, you're still losing the point, right? But at the end of the semester, because it's a bit, just in case, right, you miss a class or you get sick or whatever, I give everybody 2 extra points, right? So this is to cover emergencies where maybe, you know, you got stuck on campus, right, with these door people, or you got sick, right? So that can make up for the times you're not here, the times you're late. But really, the only way to get the point is to be on time and in person for those discussions. Okay, any questions so far? Yes.
So
Yes. Yep. This is not happening. I'm gonna turn off my phone. Hold on. And it's all spam, you know? It's not even like real people. Okay. Any other questions on this first part? Okay. Where was I? I'm blanking out. I was doing the syllabus. Okay. Thank you. Okay, that's the reading assignment, class discussion. Okay, last thing you have to do is the tests. So the tests will be essay tests, right? I will give you several topics to choose from. And I will be connecting what we do in class with political questions and so forth. So you have to actually think a little bit before answering the question, right? So these tests are really not there for you just so, unlike in my other classes where the test is just you repeat what I said throughout the semester, these particular tests, you have to actually use what I said or what we discussed in class to think through a problem that we are going through today. So one example would be, what would Kant think about abortion? Okay, so now you got to know Kant and you got to know the issues, right? And then you got to think through, what would Kant say? What would be his moral stance, right, with regards to that problem? So you have to do 2 things. You have to know the material with Kant, but you also have to know the issue. And the third thing, you have to think through using the 2 of them, right? So this is a little more, and I will be going over your writing and I'll give you the guidelines, what I'm looking for when we get closer to the test time. Okay, so that will be the test, which will be at home, right? Everything is the test you do at home, and you will hand it in. Usually the date to do is always a Saturday night, and you just put it in the Google Drive also. Okay, that's it. That's it in terms of the workload. Any questions on anything? Yes. Yeah, so I have to think about it. So I haven't figured it out. I'm open to any suggestions. Look, this is what happened. I had extra points and I didn't know what to do with them. So I created a final project, which I don't know what it will be yet. So if anyone has ideas, I'm open. Any other questions? Yes. No, because I grade on Sunday, right? When the week begins and I'm already thrown in the, yeah, so but you can, I grade Sunday morning, so you have an all-nighter if you want to abuse your body in that way and die young. Okay, anything else? Any other questions? Okay, so that's it for the syllabus. I think I've covered. All right, check. Close this. There's no more flash here. I took it down. Okay. All right. Good. So let me start. Let me begin introducing you to our our journey here. Okay. So like I said, right? I wrote the class when we are going through this xenophobic episode, right? Or maybe always have been, but now it's on the surface, right? We've always been a xenophobic country, right? But at least we had the decency to keep it to ourselves. So now it's all out, right? So it's becoming a problem. And there is really an urgency to learn or to relearn how to relate to the other. The same goes around the world, by the way. We're not the only ones struggling with this, right? If you go to Europe, there's a huge refugee crisis right now. And same reaction, right? Recoilment on ourselves, right? The rise of nationalistic movements all over Europe, including countries that are, you know, supposedly enlightened, like France or England. You have now these far-right movements that are emerging that are anti-immigration, anti-Semitic, and racist, right? And these are getting stronger and stronger. Right now, the presidential race in France, one of the candidates is one of the most racist people, openly racist people I've ever seen, right? And this is all normal now, right? So we are not only here, but in Europe, and of course, when you go even in other countries, you have the one that comes to mind is in India right now, right? Again, this nationalism against Islam, right? The Hindu nationalism versus the Muslim population of India. This is everywhere, right? This fear of the stranger, this fear of the other. We're not the only ones struggling with this, right? So the main idea, when I talk to people, right, who are anti-immigration, because I do, right, I do try to have conversations, the thing that comes up over and over again is the idea that if we let too many people into our lives, right, who are different, we will lose our identity, right? We will lose not only our resources, but we will lose our identity. And the identity part is the one I want to focus on. So before I go into that, I'll tell you a funny story that happened to me with regards to this question. So I was wandering around on the beach in Long Beach over there in New York. And I was by myself, which is never a good idea. And this old guy comes to me and we start to talk, and he finds out I'm French, and he's like, oh, wow, okay. Aren't you worried, you know, about the Muslim immigration in France? And so I'm looking at him and I'm thinking, wow, little did this man know that my father, right, was part of this Muslim immigration, right, was part of this immigration from Muslim countries, right, into France about 10, 20, 50, I don't know when he came, 50, 40 years ago, right? So I'm thinking, wow, you're asking me this question that I'm worried about the immigration from Muslim countries when I'm actually part of that immigration. But then he continues, right, I'm listening, and he's like, yeah, you know, aren't you worried that the French culture is gonna get dissolved, and, you know, the croissant is gonna go away, right? And so now I'm thinking, wow, this is getting better and better, because do you guys know where the croissant is from? Do you know where we got it from? Because it's not French, actually. Anybody know where the croissant emerged? This is really good. It's a great comeback. Nobody knows who invented the croissant? I will tell you. During the Austro-Hungarian Empire, right? They were fighting against the Turks, and they defeated the Turks. And so in celebration of that, they created a pastry shaped like the crescent, right? The Muslim crescent. This is in Austria, and it was called the croissant, right? Crescent. And then it came to France. So actually the croissant is an Arabic symbol. It comes from the Arabs, right? So here's this guy saying, oh, you're gonna lose the croissant if too many Muslims come. And actually the croissant is actually an Arab symbol, right? It's coming to us from the Arabs. So I thought that was interesting, the way that, right? I didn't say any of that, of course, because I never know what to say when I'm in shock. But so that was just to say, right, that losing the identity we're going to see here in this class is misunderstanding what is really happening. Yes, when we encounter the stranger, part of us is traumatized, for sure. Part of us is destabilized. Part of us has to go, right? But this is not a loss. What we're going to learn in this class is not a loss, it's a gain. As you shed this, as you shed a part of yourself, as you lose a part of yourself also able to grow. The best example I have, which is actually an example that Jesus gave in the New Testament, is the seed. The seed goes in the ground and it has to die, he says, right? It has to dissolve. To make room for what? Nothing? What happens when the seed dissolves in the ground? I'm not talking to a bunch of urban kids, but anybody have any idea? What happens when the seed dissolves in the ground? Something grows out of it, which is even more powerful than the seed, right? The plant, right? So this is what we need to understand right now, is that yes, the stranger will dissolve part of us. Yes, the encounter with the other will be experienced as a trauma to a certain degree, but this dissolution actually makes room for the outgrowth of the better part of yourself, right? And that's what people don't understand when they say, we're gonna lose our identity. Yeah, we're gonna lose some of our identity, but maybe we will grow into a better identity, right? This is what we're not calculating, I think. The fact that as Americans, identity is meant to evolve and identity is meant to grow, not to stay like this, right? So the contact with a stranger allows for more growth to occur, for identity to expand, for identity to grow, for identity to blossom, right? So, and we'll talk about that, of course, throughout the class. This idea will come up over and over again. So anyways, so main idea, right, will be to see the other not as a problem or a crisis, right? We talk about the refugee crisis, the immigration crisis, but as an opportunity, right? As an opportunity for growth on a communal level and also on an individual level. So of course, for this to happen, right, for us to begin to welcome the stranger, we cannot stay the same. The way that the human subject is conceived right now in the Western psyche as individual, isolated, independent is not going to work for what we're trying to do in this class. And so we will have to do in this class a redefinition of the subject. We have to understand differently what it means to be a human subject, what it means to be a human being. So from this class, we will actually move from a rational subject, which is the traditional understanding of the subject in Western thought, to a relational subject. We have to move, we have to shift the understanding of what it means to be human. So Kant is starting that movement, which is why I like him. But then it will take some Jewish philosophers who are critical of the West to continue that work. And then we will look at African philosophers and see how they actually already got there way before the West did, right? The concept of relational subjectivity is a very ancient concept in the African psyche, which we'll see. And then we'll go into some gender, right, stuff. So that's the main thing. If you're going to write anything down in this class, we're going to work together at the redefinition of what it means to be a subject. We cannot remain entrenched in the Western definitions of the subject that we are used to, right? The Western definition of the subjects, which we'll talk about in a bit, as autonomous, independent, rational, isolated. This has been taught to us over and over again, and we think this is what it means to be a subject, right? We will need to redefine and profoundly transform the inner structures of the subject in order to be able to have these encounters that will help our growth, right? Okay. So, okay. Let me go over, let me say just a few words on this Western subject, because we will be dismantling it throughout the class. So we'll review in case you forgot. This particular subject, what I'm going to use, what is it called? A straw man? My straw man will be Descartes, right? I call him a straw man because he doesn't deserve all the hate I'm about to bestow on him, because he's a little more, he's more nuanced than what I'm about to say, but this is the way we have understood Descartes. Okay, so let me write his name. No, here's my chalk. Starting. So Descartes. 17th century French. So let's review a little bit what he has to say about subjectivity. And then we will see how everything that we are today is built on that paradigm, right? So who has read Descartes? Let me begin there. Who has read Descartes? Anybody? One? Anybody else? Just one person? Two people? You have? Sort of? Okay. Okay. You need to go. Y'all need to read Descartes. Did you take modern one? Nobody? No? Yes? Did you do Descartes?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So you have read. Okay, good. So please go read the Discourse of Method if you haven't, especially if you're a philosophy major. As a philosophy major, you need to know this text. So try to find it. Is that what it's called in English? Discourse of Method? You who has taken Descartes? Does that sound familiar? Okay, good. Okay, Discourse on Method is the easiest version, right? And this is where I'm drawing everything I'm going to tell you right now. So you can go and read it later if you want. So it's very interesting what he's doing. But there's something very problematic also. So Descartes decides one day that he wants to find absolute certainty. So he's like, it's the question that is posed in The Matrix. How many of you saw The Matrix? Okay, so this, right, the question of what if we're just with tubes, right, and we're just sitting in water and we're imagining everything and the world is not real, it's just in our head and we're just like some thing, right, attached to tubes, right? That was actually the Cartesian question. That was his first question. What if this, what I'm having right now is just a dream, right? What if it's not really real? How can I be sure that it's real? What can I be sure of, right? And so as he's thinking, he's realizing, well, one thing I can be sure of is that I'm thinking, right? For sure, I'm having thoughts. That I can be sure of. And if I'm having thoughts, there is a subject that is having these thoughts. And so the first thing I can be sure of is that there is a subject. Are you seeing how this is starting really bad? Right? You'll see why in a second. So he says, there is a subject. He says, therefore, right? This is a famous quote. I think, therefore, there is a subject, I am. Okay, this is the famous quote by Descartes. Make sure you write it down. I think, therefore, I am, right? The fact that I'm thinking means that there is something that is thinking. Therefore, there must be a subject that is thinking. Therefore, the first certainty that we know for sure is there is a subject. And then from this subject that he has just discovered, he is going to go on and prove that the world is real, that God is real, and so forth. So everything will flow out of the subject, right? Including the existence of the other. Let me give you just how he does those three things, just so that you have a good a summary of Descartes. So he first starts out, he has to prove that the world is real. But for that, he needs the concept of God, right? And so he first has to prove God is real, right? Because for him, the world is real only if it's not just a figment of our imagination, if it's actually real, if there is not some evil thing that is tricking us, right? So he has to first prove that there is God. So this is how he does this. He says this. Well, as I look at all my thoughts, I see that I have in my thoughts the idea of infinity. And I realize when I look around me that nothing in this world could have inspired that idea. Nothing is infinite. Everything is finite. Everything is bound to die. So how do I have this idea in my head about infinity when nothing in this world could have inspired it? And so from there, he goes on to say, well, therefore, this idea must come from somewhere else than this world. And it was most certainly put in my head by an infinite being, right? So he's jumping a few hoops, right? He's jumping, I mean, he's, I can't say that in English. I think there's some moments of the argument that he skips over, right? But in general, that's the idea, right? That only an infinite being could have been the object that has given me this idea, right? So from there, he proves that God exists. So it's very interesting, right? That, but again, right? It comes from him. He proves that God exists, right? It's not God reveals himself to him. No, from his reasoning, he proves that God exists. And he will do the same with the proof for other human beings. Everybody got the proof on God? This is important because that's just to show you how this guy is thinking and how the whole West is thinking with him, right? It's not God came one day, interrupted his world, revealed himself, and now he's like, oh, God, okay? No, he sits by himself and he's thinking, and he's like, what's in my head? Ah, infinity. Okay, therefore, and it's all happening in his head. I am deducing, therefore, that there must be an object that is the cause of this idea. This object is not in the world, therefore, there's an object greater than the world, therefore, God, right? So notice how everything is starting from him. He is the one determining whether God exists or not, which is already, in my view, extremely audacious, right? Then, same thing with the existence of people. So watch this. This is where it gets very tricky. He says, this is how I know other people exist. He says, I see bodies moving around that look like me. Already you can sense the very bad direction he's taking. They look like me. And so therefore, if they look like me, they must be somehow like me also on the inside, right? If they look like me on the outside and they behave like me on the outside, surely then they're animated by the same inner life as I am on the inside. Therefore, they must be humans like me and not just robots or images that I'm seeing. Now, can anyone tell me the problem with this way of describing or determining that the other exists? There is a number of problems in the way he does that should make some of you uncomfortable. So let me give the argument again, right? I see people outside who look like me, right? They behave like me. Therefore, they must be animated by the same inner life as I am. So what if they don't look like me? What if they don't behave like me? Are they animated by the same inner life that I am? Are you seeing the problem here? And by the way, this is not even, I'm not even making this up. When the Europeans came to Latin America and they saw the Indians and they're like, huh, they don't look like us. They don't behave like us. Do they have a soul? And you know what they would do? They would dip them in fire to see if they burned like, you know, the same, right? So just to see if they react the same to fire as us to see, right? So there was actually right? Do you see how the Cartesian argument is really limited, right? It's all coming from, in as much as you look like me and behave like me, okay, you deserve the same inner life I have. But if you don't look like me, if you don't behave like me, then I have doubts. And indeed, this is what happened throughout the history of colonization. The colonizer had doubts that the colonized were human and were, you know, had a soul or had, you know, equal reason or dignity because they look so different, right? So, but I mean, we have to do, Descartes is really not, you know, he's not trying to be a jerk, right? When he's thinking like this, but you can see how the Western way of thinking is really completely centered on the self. And whatever the self is seeing has to look like it in order to be valid, right? In order to be given the dignity of human. And this is where it all begins. And then people build on that, right? And then you have, I think Husserl did a similar argument. It's called the argument by analogy, what I just said about other people, right? They look like me, behave like me, therefore they are like me, right? They are worthy of having a soul, right? So this is, you're starting to see, we study these things like they're, you know, universal truths. Yes, this is how it is, but we don't see the problem with this way of thinking, that when you start to think that everything exists in relation to you, then there is a problem. Because whatever is not in relation to you, whatever you do not understand, then you have trouble acknowledging its value, right? And so that's the issue with Western concept of the subject. So to summarize, right, the issue with the Western concept of the subject, number one, the subject is the beginning of everything. The other is just a product of the self. That's really what we see with Descartes. Let me say that again. The other is just a product of the self for Descartes, right? I'm the one who determines that you are human. And based on what? Our resemblance. This is the two problems, right? Number one, I'm the one who decides if you're human with my reason, right? And I decide this based on the fact that you look like me. Now, if you don't look like me, we have a problem. And we've seen in history how this translates, right? So that's the problem, right? And so such a subject is not structured to truly encounter another. And we're going to see the criticism of this Cartesian subject over and over again, especially when we get to Emmanuel Levinas, because that's his specialty, to criticize the Western subject, right? But we're going to see how people like Kant already starts to unravel this, but Buber, Levinas, and then especially when we get to the African philosophers, we're going to have a critique of this Western subject. And then, of course, Irigaray will be the what do you call it when you're beating someone up and then the final punch and they die? Is there a word for that? The what? The knockout punch. Yes, Irigaray will be the knockout punch, right? So this will be a boxing ring where we will really look at Western philosophy critically, so that we can see that there's, you know, what we have thought as being the only way of thinking is flawed, and there are other ways of thinking, right? Okay, great. So now that we have Descartes, we can move into these other guys. So I'm going to introduce them one by one, just give you a brief introduction. And I'm running out of battery, which is a problem. Anyways, okay, let's start with Emmanuel Kant. He's the first one we will read. He's the one who will sound the most Western, because he is very, very, very Western, right? But he's intelligent enough to begin to sense that there is a different way of talking about things. And that's what I like about him. He's actually subtle enough to be able to make progress in the way that we think of the subject. So Kant is going to talk about reason. When you read his text, he will talk about reason over and over again, the rational subject, reason as being this, what makes us truly human, right? But here's where it's going to be interesting. Reason for Kant is not an intellectual category, it's a moral faculty. It's not an intellectual faculty, it's a moral faculty. In other words, reason is the part enough which is capable of relating. That's where I think Kant is interesting, right? Reason is not, so he's not talking about rational animal, like, oh, we think and we have technology and we have science and that's how we're so hot and wonderful as human beings. No, for Kant, reason is already a relational faculty because it's a moral faculty. It's a way of sensing. It's a radar which senses the others around us. And we're going to see how he does that. So this is where I think he's very interesting. And we're going to talk about how for Kant, ultimately, the self is truly itself when it is engaged with another. And that's interesting because you don't have that. You don't have that in Descartes, right? Descartes, for him, what makes the beauty of the human self is the ability to think, right? Is the ability to do science, mathematics, technology, right? That's what makes our dignity as human beings and most of the Western thinkers, right? Reason is the part of us which can control nature, which can, create science and technology. But here, Kant is going to move away from this. He's going to say, no. Reason is a relational faculty. It's the ability for us to engage with others. In this sense, he's very close to the etymology of the word reason, right? Reason in Latin, ratio, but in Greek, logos, right? Logos, which means to link, to connect, right? So this is where Kant is going. He's going with a Greek version of what it means to have reason or logos, right? Or ratio in Latin is to connect, right? So that's going to be interesting. So already Kant is moving in the direction that we want to move. And so we'll study him together for the first couple weeks. Then we'll move to Martin Buber. So Martin Buber is late 19th, early 20th century. He was born in the late 19th century. So his main issue, I'm just going to summarize all of them for you right now. His main issue is this. We're living in a world where more and more everything is becoming a means to an end. That's in a nutshell the Buberian analysis of what's going on. Everything is just a means for the self. And if we look at our relationships and our lives, we will see that this is actually true, right? We have cars, we have computers, we have even friends, we have friends for this, friends for that. And then when we're done with those friends, we ghost them, right? So we have, right, especially in our culture, right, everything is just here at our fingertips. And when we're done, we discard, right? This relationship not working, I'm gone. You did this to me, I ghost you. I unfriend you. I do this, I do that, right? So we live in a world more and more where everything is just a means to an end. And according to Buber, we are losing something fundamental when we act like this also with human beings, right? It's okay to act like this with an object, right? I'm using my pencil breaks, I'm not gonna have any soulful reaction to that, I'm gonna throw it away, right? So it's okay with objects, but when it comes to people, if we continue to act with people like we act with objects, right, we are losing something fundamental, which Buber calls the sacredness of the human dimension, right? We are losing the sacredness of the human dimension. So, so that's the first thing, right? That's the thing we'll be studying. With Buber, we're going to be looking at especially this notion that the I cannot be an I without a you, right? This is one of the most beautiful quotes of Buber, is going to show that I cannot be truly myself without a connection, a genuine connection with another human being. As long as my relationships are just relationships of I'm using you and discarding you, I'm happy, it's true, but I haven't reached the depth of what it means to be human as a subject, right? So he says we need to go deeper in our relationships if we're going to be true subjects, true selves, right? So you're seeing how we're going into this relational view of the subject. Okay, then we'll do Emmanuel Levinas. And I'm warning you, Emmanuel Levinas is the hardest philosopher you will ever encounter in your lives. He's a nightmare. But he's also, some of you studied him already, right? But he's also, for me, the most poetic philosopher. It's really a pleasure to read him if you just get caught up in the aesthetics of it, right? Just the rhythm of his writing is amazing. So I've always loved him for that. Even I don't understand everything, I like the rhythm of his work. So Levinas himself actually was a refugee, right? He was a Jewish refugee during World War II. He lost his whole family in the Holocaust. And he is the one really where we will see the most acute criticism of the Western self. Why? Because he comes from a school of thought which blames the Holocaust not on just an accident of history, but on the whole philosophical mentality of the West. So this is important. Make sure you write this down, right? Levinas is going to come from a school of thought. And by the way, y'all should be writing more. I don't know how you're going to remember all this. Y'all should be writing everything I'm saying, right? So you can have something substantial to tell me on the test. Okay. So he says this, right? I'm about to lose my recording. Yes, I will. Let me just charge. I can't charge. I'm torn. Do I stop the recording? I know. Sorry, I'm gonna charge and no one will see me on camera, but at least I'll be heard. Okay, what is this fancy thing they did here? Okay. All right. Sorry to whoever is watching this. Okay, so Levinas, right, is coming from a school of thought, and this we're going to study this. It's really interesting. Where they look at the Holocaust, right? If you remember, the Holocaust is the genocide of 6 million Jews, right? And they look at the Holocaust not as an accident in history. Some people do, right? They say it's an accident in history. We don't know how it happened. They say no, actually, it's very simple. It's mathematical. It's centuries of Western philosophy and it's centuries of Western concept of the subject, which has led us to this crisis. So we're going to study this and see how actually the seeds of the Holocaust were already in the Western way of thinking. It was actually, the Holocaust was a natural consequence of a way of thinking about the subject. So we're going to talk about that. So it's very interesting, very good acute criticism of the Western concept of the subject. Then we'll go to the two African philosophers we have. One is Senegalese, the other one is South African. So these two guys, Leopold Senghor, anybody know who that is? Very famous, Leopold Senghor. He was the first president of Senegal after the independence. And he was actually not only a statesman, he was also a poet. He wrote essays. He even made it into the top French literature figures, right? So he's very well known for his writings, actually. And actually, he was maybe too much of a poet because he didn't last as a president. The main reason was that he was one of the people who wanted to keep ties with France, right? When Senegal used to be under French rule, right? And when the Senegalese got independent, they said, no, we're doing everything on our own. We're cutting ties. And he said, well, that's not smart. You know, we need to stay in touch. This will help us, right? We shouldn't just cut off. And so he was really hated for that, and he was booted out of the presidency. But he was one of the philosophers, in my view, who, in my view, his contribution was more philosophical than political. He, along with Aimé Césaire, how many of you have heard of Aimé Césaire? This is the Caribbean. Where's our Jamaican friend? Who is the Jamaican? You? Yeah. Have you heard of Aimé Césaire? Okay. So he's a French Caribbean. So it's not your part of the world. But he and Leopold Senghor, right, came up with this idea that we need to recapture what it means to be an African thinker, right? So we have been too long schooled in the Western way of thinking, and we need to recover what it means to think as a Black man or as Black man or woman, right? So they really developed a concept which at the time was called negritude, right? Which had to do with what does it mean to think and to see the world and to describe the world and to inhabit the world as a Black man and not just as a disembodied Western thinker, right? So they really wanted to emphasize what is our particular genius as Africans? What do we have to bring to the table? What is our particular worldview? What is our particular philosophical contribution? We need to explore who we are because we have been for too long indoctrinated to think like Europeans. And so they really trying to, so they go back to traditional concepts, African concepts, traditional stories, and they try to figure out together what does it mean to think like an African? What does it mean to see the world like an African? And they come up with some very interesting ideas, which actually echo beautifully some of what Levinas will write. So I actually like, that would be a great dissertation, right, or essay, Levinas and these guys. So anyway, so they will be very interesting, and they will be the main concept out of the African tradition that they will explore and dig and kind of try to excavate is the African concept of Ubuntu, which we'll study, of course, in depth. But you can already look it up if you want. This is in a nutshell, Ubuntu is I am if you are. That's in a nutshell. I am if you are. So we'll look at how this played out in not only in literature, but in politics, right? We're going to talk about this at length and see that there is really, when it comes to relational subjectivity, a lot of work already. There's a lot of groundwork, I would say, that has been laid down by these guys, which I would love people to continue to work on, right? It's significant to me that all these books are out of print, right? I gotta go dig them up in some dusty library and make photocopies for you, like where, I don't know, in some kind of, Twilight Zone, right? So it just tells me, right, these books are not being disseminated, they're not being taught, and there's very important ideas in these books that especially as Westerners, we need to learn. So we'll be studying those, this will be my revolution. And hopefully you will maybe take up these books and develop these ideas later, right? Okay, so that will be our section on African philosophy. And then, yes, so we'll have Leopold Senghor from Senegal. This is the beginning of the 20th century. And then Augustine Chotti from South Africa. Let me write his names on the board. So Augustine. So if you want to try to find the text, Augustine Chotti, this is Philosophy for Africa. So these are really old books, right? Which are out of print. And then you have Leopold Senghor. I'm going to pick an article, an essay that he wrote. And he's a little more known than Chotti, but both are really important. They're pioneers, right, in this kind of search for the African concept of the subject and so forth. Okay, then we will end with feminist philosopher. We have to end with a woman because I am a woman and we need more women in this field. So, and you're lucky guys in the room because I've chosen a soft-core feminist, right? She loves men, so we're good. So she's very interesting actually. She talks how we need to think, she says in a nutshell, how we have thought of the subject as one universal subject, right? And what she's saying is no, subjectivity is at least two, male and female, at least, meaning, so she's not limiting it to that. She's saying at least we have to think of the subject as being binary and beyond, right? So for those, so many people criticize Irigaray, say, yeah, she's a binary philosopher. No, she said we start and we expand, right? So, but she says we need to move from one subject that's universal, that we all share, to at least two, where there's a gender coming into play, meaning a woman sees the world differently from a man. But this at least is very important, because what she's saying is there's even more ways, right, of seeing the world that we need to be exploring, right? Whether it's from a given sexual orientation, or from a given culture, or given ethnicity. There are myriads of ways that so the subject is multiple. That's what she's saying, that there's no universal one-size-fits-all subject like we have been taught, like you have been taught in philosophy, right? Oh, the subject has feelings and then it synthesizes to have thoughts. Yeah, that's one way, right? There are other ways of inhabiting the world. And that's what Irigaray says when she says, there's not just one way to be a subject. The way that has been described in the textbooks of philosophy up until now is only one way of being a subject, right? There are myriads of other ways of inhabiting the world and entering the world and engaging with the world, which are different, right? And so she will open it up to the gender difference, but of course, this is an invitation to go even further, right? Irigaray is not saying, yeah, there's only two, right? Like, and that's it, everybody else can go to hell. No, she's saying at least two, meaning there's 3, 4, 5, thousands of ways to look at the world and to be a subject, right? Okay, so that's the program. I hope you're excited. That's what we'll be doing. I think that's all I wanted to say. I don't have the time anymore. What's the time?
4:12.
Thank you. Okay, we're almost done. Awesome. So I am done with what I have to say. Anybody has any other questions? Anything else you want to say?
Are the books in the syllabus?
That's such a good question. No, but they're on the online bookstore. Do you know how to get there?
But you said there were 5, and that's what I only saw like 3 maybe?
Yeah, because the African ones I have to make copies.
Oh,
So you have hopefully you have Kant, Buber, Levinas, and Irigaray. Normally you should have 4 books. Did anybody check? Who has looked into the books yet? Yeah. 4, right? Okay. So you buy those 4, and I will take care of the out-of-print ones. Any other questions? Anything else? Okay. So also feel free, right? This is an early class for me, so I always have time to talk afterwards. So if anybody wants to talk further about the material, or if you're dealing with a trauma of a stranger in your life, right? We can talk and apply and discuss how to apply what you do in class to your life. So feel free to always stop by after class. These are my office hours for you. So after class is official office hours where you can come and talk, and I have lots of time because it's early class. Okay, I will see you in a couple of days. Please buy your books with me. I will introduce Kant next time, so there's no work.